Hello and welcome to episode number 37 of JRocks Pop Culture Revolution. Hope everybody had a great 4th of July holiday weekend. I know I did. And as we sit here on July 5th, Sunday evening, right before I'm getting ready to go to bed, as we sit here doing this, just in case anybody was wondering, it's about 9:55 at night. So that's when I'm getting doing my Sunday evening right before I go to bed. And in case you're wondering, in, in case you didn't tune in last week, we always like to tell you guys what we're going to be talking about the following week. And in case anybody didn't tune in last week, what we're going to be talking about in episode number 37 here is this fabulous movie from 1993. And of course, I'm talking about one of my all-time favorite comedy movies. And it's the one and only Mrs. Doubtfire. Now, anybody who's ever seen, Mrs. Doubtfire, it remains a classic comedy movie from the 1990s. I can tell you, me personally, ever since I saw the movie when it originally came out in 1993. I remember going to the theater, first time I ever seen it. I think I took my grandmother with me, may she rest in peace, and both me and my grandma were cracking up. My grandma just loved Robin Williams. He was a star of the show, and this is like in many ways, it was a modern day kind of Tootsie type of movie. Tootsie, I believe, from 1980 came starring Dustin Hoffman. Of course, it was a different type of a story, but along the same lines, where the main character in the movie dresses up like a female. So again, for 1993, this was pretty provocative. It was pretty out there, but it was a great comedy movie, and we're going to really be talking about now. Let's get into some of the facts revolving around the movie. Now, some general facts are this: the official release date was November 24th, 1993. It was, like I said, it was a comedy family drama type of movie. The running time was about 125 minutes. It was based on Alias Madame Doubtfire by Anne Fine. The director, of course, was Christopher Columbus. Not the famous explorer Christopher Columbus, but the director, of course, known as Chris Columbus. Okay, production company was 20th Century Fox. As far as the box office, what this made overall at the box office was $440 million worldwide. We're talking not just in the U.S. but worldwide. That's what the film made, making it one of the highest growing films of 1993. Excuse me. So, man, just had to get all that out of the way. Now, let's really kind of talk about why this movie is so special. Like I said, I remember seeing it in the movie theater, and it's one of those. Since it's been in the movie theaters, oftentimes they'll play Mrs. Doubtfire like on the movie channels on if you get cable. Oftentimes you'll see it like on HBO, TBS even sometimes will play it on the weekends and stuff. Um, just a great all-time comedy movie, and you can't help but laugh. It's one of those movies I remember from. I just watched it tonight again for the first time in years, and I laughed just as much as the first time I saw it. It's just that type of movie, and that's why I always loved funny comedies. Like you asked me, I love going to see many different types of movies, but if you ask me what's my all-time favorite type of movie to go see, I'll tell you it's a comedy because I just love to laugh. And how many of us sometimes, you're having a bad day, you're going through whatever you're going through in your everyday life, and struggling just to get by, and yet you go see a funny comedy like Mrs. Doubtfire, and for 125 minutes of this film at least, you forget about all your problems, you're laughing, and you're just cracking up, and sometimes that's what we all need to get through the day, and so that's why this is just one of those films that I highly recommend. Mrs. Doubtfire is one of those films that it really has become a classic. If you ask me, you know, like to give you a list, and maybe this will something we'll do in a future episode. Come up with a list of like my top 10 favorite comedy movies of all time or something like that. I mean, I don't know exactly where Mrs. Doubtfire would be because I really haven't thought about, but it definitely would be on that top 10 list. I guarantee you. And again, Robin Williams is just kind of, he was a funny comedian. I mean, everything he did, pretty much, he could also, besides being a great comedian, though, you gotta remember he also did drama and stuff like, the Dead Poet Society. That's one of my all-time favorite films. And it's completely different from what he's doing in Mrs. Doubtfire here. But again, that just kind of shows you the broad range of what a great actor the late great Robin Williams really was, and why it was such a tragic loss when he passed away a number of years ago. Um, so that's kind of my introduction to talking about Mrs. Doubtfire tonight. Now, of course, let's talk about the main cast. Robin Williams, of course, is Daniel Hillard, Mrs. Euthygena Doubtfire. Now, what a name! Try to say that three times. Of course, his wife, soon to be ex-wife, was played, of course, like by the late great. Excuse me, not late great. I mean, Sally Field is still among the living. Excuse me. Like I said, just had a very busy week, and so please, Sally Field is very much among the living. She's in her like late 80s. A lot of us first came to know Sally Field, of course, as Gidget in the 1950s. Now, the 1950s, of course, I wasn't here, but I caught Sally Field in the role of Gidget, of course, in reruns, like a lot of people my age, and that is what even though she's in her 80s, and so talking about Sally Field, in addition to being known as Gidget and being in Mrs. Doubtfire, another role that Sally Field would become famous for, of course, would be playing the elderly mother of Forrest Gump in the Forrest Gump movie. So quite an accomplished actress in her own right. Pierce Brosnan as Stu Dunmire, of course. Mrs. Doubtfire kind of has some sparring moments with him because he's invited out to dinner with the Hillard family and Stu, and of course nobody knows that Mrs. Doubtfire is really Daniel Hillard in disguise, until halfway through the movie, and of course then once that happens, there's this big reveal and kind of everything starts to kind of come to a head, and but for a good portion of the movie, Mrs. Doubtfire is just kind of lights up a room, if you know what I mean, as far as all the very funny comedic scenes, and all these actors that I'm naming, they had great chemistry, and it was just hilarious. Everybody played their role, and they played it just as I think it was written. So let's talk about the plot. Kind of what was the movie actually about? After losing custody of his children following a divorce, Daniel Hillard disguises himself as an elderly British housekeeper named Mrs. Doubtfire. And he does this in order to basically get a job because he finds out that his ex-wife, instead of allowing him to spend time with his children after they get out of school, because she doesn't get home from her job like until 7 p.m. at night, and he thinks, okay, I'm going to have to need a housekeeper now that me and my husband are getting divorced. He's no longer living in the house, and he finds out about this, and that's basically how he kind of comes up with the idea of Mrs. Doubtfire, and he gets himself hired, very convincingly, I might add, and it's very interesting because at first Miranda Hillard, the wife, she's enamored by kind of Mrs. Doubtfire, and then she sees her as a confidant, and she's talks a little bit about her crazy ex-husband, not knowing that the husband is actually sitting there disguised as Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, that in itself is just so hilarious. And even at one point, one of my favorite lines that Robin Williams says throughout the movie is, "Oh my dear, I'm sure that you don't normally verbally lash out about your children's father in front of him." It's just that's one of the most memorable scenes in the movie, and that is kind of a plot of a movie. Now, there's a lot more to talk about in regards to Mrs. Doubtfire. Now, as far as Academy Awards, it won for Best Makeup, and how could it not? Because a big part of Mrs. Doubtfire, I mean, I mean, one of the things about pulling off a movie like this, got to really be convincing. I mean, and look at this. If I looked at look at this picture, if I'd never seen the movie, you think, oh wow, that's an old lady. That's an elderly old lady. I mean, I'm convinced that's Mrs. Doubtfire. And then only once you start watching the movie, there's the big reveal, and you realize, like, okay, this guy's he's really pulling the wool over his soon-to-be ex-wife, but he's doing it because she's very controlling, very bitter. And he thinks it's the only way he's going to get a chance to spend any time with his children. And it's one of those situations that he's almost kind of forced into doing it. But the makeup, I could see why the makeup won for an Academy Award for Best Makeup. I mean, it was such a big part of why this movie was so funny and the success. I mean, there's one point where the person that comes and checks on Daniel Hillard, twice a week, Mondays and Fridays, she's gonna pop at his apartment and see how he's doing. Like keeping, he's got a good, decent place for the children to live, how he's living his life. Makes reports every 2 weeks, and she comes on one of these days, and catches him kind of off guard, and as he's entering, they meet at the front door of the apartment and kind of are going in together, and she says, "Oh, let me go get my brother," and oh, we'll go in the apartment together, and the chaos and craziness begins. Mrs. Daniel Hillard, aka Mrs. Doubtfire, is in the bedroom as the person from the court is waiting for Daniel Hillard to come out. Daniel is apparently taking a shower and he's changing, and then Mrs. Doubtfire introduces herself as Daniel's sister, and then Mrs. Doubtfire gets out of her costume, comes into the living room, and Daniel reappears, if you will, and is talking to the court, the person from the court, if you will, and he says, "Oh, my sister makes a beautiful cup of English tea," and "Oh, I love English tea. I would love a cup." Okay, so then the chaos begins yet again, and Daniel Hillard has to run back into his bedroom and get dressed as Mrs. Doubtfire again, and reappears, and then this face, this kind of prosthetic face that he was using to kind of look more like a woman, falls out his second-story bedroom, and a big 18-wheeler truck runs over it. So eventually he has to replace the mask, but in the meantime, it's like, oh my God, this woman, is waiting for her tea. What am I going to do? So he just dips his face into this cake that's in his refrigerator, and it appears that he's got like one of those night masks on that many women put on before they go to bed. And he makes a tea because the woman's waiting for her tea, and as he's handing her tea, the face mask, what's the cake, but really it appears as a face mask. It just starts and apparently it was because it got so hot in the studio where they were filming that the cake just started dripping off of Robin Williams' face, and it's dripping into the cup of tea. And as they say, the craziness just kind of and chaos just goes on from there. But you can see why the makeup is such a big part of this, and why you can see why this movie of all movies would win an Academy Award for the makeup. Golden Globe. Okay, as far as getting a Golden Globe for this, it won for Best Motion Picture, for a musical or comedy. Also for the Golden Globe, Robin Williams won as Best Actor. Way to go, Mr. Williams, but well, I mean, he had me convinced that he was so. I think he really deserved to win such an award. A little more interesting trivia here about the late great Robin Williams. Robin Williams, not just in Mrs. Doubtfire, but pretty much every movie or TV show he was ever a part of, what he was really known for was just his ability to improvise. He was one of those actors that could just ad lib on the spot. And we're going to talk about a little more about that. Williams was famous for improvisation, and many of the funniest lines were in the script. Director Chris Columbus reportedly filmed multiple versions of scenes because Williams would invent new jokes with each take. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, how that could throw the director and the producer and even the writers and the other actors he was working with off. But it became such a thing, and that the director Chris Columbus, particularly in reference to Mrs. Doubtfire, he just decided, you know what, Robin is really just great at improvisation, and we're going to just let him go wild. And I guess that's why as they're editing the movie, they had many different takes to kind of choose from, and I guess they went with what they felt was the funniest scenes. And so that's another interesting fact about this movie that we got to really shine a light on. And like I said, the makeup process, it was really, really intense. Transforming Williams into Mrs. Doubtfire, get this, took approximately 4 to 4.5 hours each day, with another hour or more required to remove the makeup. Now, I don't know what would be more. So that's like a total of 8 hours just to, 4.5 hours, put the makeup on, another 4.5 hours to take the makeup. You can imagine after like a long day of shooting a movie, you're like ready to go home, but before you can leave the studio, they got to get all that massive makeup off. Man, you can imagine, talk about being under the hot lights of a movie studio. Man, you can imagine what that was like. Now let's talk a little bit about the restaurant scene and why that became so iconic. The sequence when Daniel rapidly changes between himself and Mrs. Doubtfire at the restaurant was inspired by classic farce and required careful choreography despite looking effortless. So again, if you see like the scene we're talking about in the restaurant where he keeps running back and forth, between the bathroom, and then he's having a business meeting with this guy that he's trying to get a job with, and then he's also having dinner as Mrs. Doubtfire with the Hillard family and Stu. And he's running back and forth between the two tables, having to run back and forth to the bathrooms, changing into Mrs. Doubtfire, changing back into Daniel Hillard, and it just chaos assumes, and erupts is a better word for that. But man, so that's another thing to kind of keep in mind. I mean, just the whole why that scene became so iconic. Let's talk a little bit about the famous pie in the face moment. It was actually an accident. During filming, the whipped cream on Mrs. Doubtfire's face began slipping because of the hot studio lights. Williams stayed in character and continued acting, creating one of the most memorable scenes, not just of the movie, probably, but of his entire career. And that's the scene I was talking about, where the person from the court is coming up, and she meets Mrs. Doubtfire, aka Daniel's sister, and then the prosthetic facial mask to look more like a woman, it gets destroyed. So he has to think of something real quick, and he got this cake in the fridge, loaded up with whipped cream, kind of just spreads the whipped cream over his face. And again, the chaos just kind of erupts, becoming one of the most iconic scenes in the entire movie. Robin Williams learned to move like an elderly woman. I mean, that takes, he was known for being kind of what's called a method actor. When he would, get a movie script, he would really study the character. He would do research like a lot of actors do, but he took it a little further. Like he says, okay, well, I'm supposed to be this elderly woman, Mrs. Doubtfire. He really studied like how to walk like an elderly person, and it allowed him to be very convincing that he was this Mrs. Doubtfire character. So man, he really kind of studied the part, if you will, and I think that's why he was able to kind of really portray Mrs. Doubtfire as great as he did. I mean, he really put his all his heart and effort into this character, and it's kind of funny because I mean, it's not exactly the same type of character, but like Tyler Perry's Medea character. I mean, for one thing, Medea is black. Mrs. Doubtfire is an elderly white woman, supposedly supposed to be Mrs. Doubtfire's, of course, English. But Tyler Perry, the only thing that's kind of different, Tyler Perry has had many Medea movies. And I think it's a shame Mrs. Doubtfire didn't even have a part two, because I think there could have been many other follow-up movies. I mean, especially by the end of Mrs. Doubtfire, the movie here that we're talking about, he actually turned the experience of Mrs. Doubtfire into an actual TV character. I would have liked to see it, part two, maybe where we kind of continue to see the adventures of Mrs. Doubtfire on TV. That would have been so hilarious. And I've heard that there's been talk of maybe either doing another Mrs. Doubtfire. Of course, with Robin Williams having passed on, they would have to get somebody else to play the role of Mrs. Doubtfire. And stuff like that has been done before, but I just don't know that, how can anybody ever follow up the great portrayal that Robin Williams did of Mrs. Doubtfire? But then again, there's also been talk of, okay, they may indeed make another Mrs. Doubtfire movie, and they very well may indeed get a new actor. Got no other choice. What are you going to do? But one way they've been talking about, we're just going to kind of do a reboot. Because again, how do you make Mrs. Doubtfire 2? Maybe they could have done that with Robin Williams even years later, but that's no longer a possibility. So I do think if they were ever going to do that, the only possibility really is a reboot with a different actor. But who knows? We'll see if that ever happens. And let's talk about the dentures. I mean, there is one scene where Mrs. Doubtfire's alleged dentures fall out into the glass of water she's taking there in the restaurant. So it said the false teeth used for Mrs. Doubtfire actually subtly changed Robin Williams' pronunciation, helping to create the character's distinctive voice. That's another thing. I mean, many actors do jobs as voiceovers and even radio personalities, but and even when as a movie's ending and we start to kind of see there's a Mrs. Doubtfire TV show, kind of the adventures of Mrs. Doubtfire now. That's kind of how the movie ends. There's no argument that what made Mrs. Doubtfire a really memorable character was that voice. And he mastered the voice, Robin Williams, I'm talking about, throughout the entire movie. That's why the voice alone, the look, just everything about Mrs. Doubtfire, the glasses, that's what makes it such an iconic, memorable character. And Robin Williams is a reason for that. Let's be honest. It was filmed primarily in California. Many interior scenes were shot on sound stages, while numerous exterior locations, including the Hillard family house, were filmed around San Francisco. And oftentimes people will see a house or something, or even like they watch an episode of Full House, or um, people go to a fan, like somebody watching Full House or even the Brady Bunch. People people try to find out. Hey, okay, hey, I heard that that Full House house they use it was actually somebody's house in San Francisco. People go on the internet, they research, they try to find where the actual house is so they can go get a picture of the actual Full House. Um, and so even like in reference to Mrs. Doubtfire, people have researched, found out that there's this actual house that was used in the movie in San Francisco. People go and take pictures in front of a house and say, "Hey, I took a picture in front of Mrs. Doubtfire's house," or the movie that was used in Mrs. Doubtfire house. So it's and again talking about pop culture and stuff like that, stuff like hey, that's the house that was in Mrs. Doubtfire. That is a big thing for people. They will have fun, and they will research where the house is located. They'll actually drive to the house just to get a picture of someone, post on their Facebook page. I mean, people do really crazy things, but that's how much people love this movie. So just kind of think about that. Um, and so again, oftentimes when people go to visit San Francisco, they seek out this house, the actual Hillard house that was in the Mrs. Doubtfire movie. It's almost become a famous San Francisco landmark, if you can believe that. Um, Now, Mrs. Doubtfire, the movie, the film showed that family movies could balance heartfelt themes with slapstick comedy, influencing many family films released throughout the 1990s. Let's talk about some of the memorable quotes throughout the movie. Some well known lines included, "Help is on the way, dear. Hallelujah. Puppy down. Seize the teeth." And let's talk about the film's legacy, okay? More than 30 years after its release, Mrs. Doubtfire remains one of Robin Williams' most beloved performances from throughout his entire career. It's a mix of humor and emotional honesty, has helped it endure across generations. Um, and the story was later adapted for the stage musical Mrs. Doubtfire, which premiered in 2019. Wow, can you believe that? I didn't even know that until just kind of researching for tonight's episode. Um, Now let's talk about some lesser known facts. The film's PG rating was unusual for family comedy at the time due to some mature humor and language. I think you're getting my drift, if you will. Um, the source reveal ends differently than the film, with a more restrained resolution. Okay, several scenes featuring Williams' improvisations were trimmed simply because they made the cast and crew laugh too much to keep a straight face. Despite years of discussion, a sequel was never made. Development effectively ended after Robin Williams' death in 2014. As those involved felt, the original stood best on its own. And I kind of was just saying that, that a really great film like this, I mean, it would be hard. It would be hard to kind of recapture that magic. And of course, anybody, even the best actor they could possibly get, a name actor or a new up and coming actor, as great of a job as they would do in the role of Mrs. Doubtfire, sadly there'd be constant comparisons to the late great Robin Williams. Because let's be honest, Robin Williams, he was Mrs. Doubtfire. He mastered that role, and I just don't think anybody else could be quite as convincing. There would always be that comparison for the simple fact but he was Mrs. Doubtfire. He was the original. And I just don't think anybody could capture the magic that Robin Williams delivered as Mrs. Doubtfire. So I mean, that's just kind of and it said Robin Williams improvised almost everything, every single scene throughout the entire movie, folks. And there are multiple versions of the movie. There's a PG version, a PG-13 version, an R-rated version, and even an NC-17 cut from the raw footage. It's hard to believe that they have so many different versions of one film, but when you got that kind of improvisation going on, I guess you could have an adult version, like a version for teenagers. So that's kind of great to know. The famous frosting scene was completely accidental. We talk a lot about this scene tonight. One of the funniest moments happens when Mrs. Doubtfire's frosting face mask begins melting while she's talking to the social worker from the court. That wasn't planned. It just kind of happened, and as the film is rolling, they just kind of went with it, folks. Okay. The studio lights, as we were saying earlier, were so hot that the whipped cream started sliding off Robin Williams' face, just from the pure heat in the room. Rather than stopping the take, he stayed in character and improvised. There you go, dear. You got your cream and your sugar now. Everyone loved it, so it stayed in the film. I love discovering stuff like this because again, a lot of times you watch a movie, you think, hey, it's all in the script, and everything is scripted. But I love, and you can tell that really Robin Williams was a master of improvisation, and that scene was so magical. I love the fact that it just kind of happened, and it became one of the most iconic comedic moments in the entire movie. So that's one of the every time, even tonight, when I'm watching the movie before I sit down to do this episode, that was one of the scenes that just had me cracking up. It doesn't matter how many times I've seen the movie; it's one of my favorite scenes. I got to be honest. The camera literally ran out of film. Director Chris Columbus revealed that Williams' improvisations caused the camera to literally run out of film. Nearly 2 million feet of film, roughly 972 boxes of footage. There has even been discussions about creating a documentary of all the unusual behind the scenes material. Now, if you're not going to do a Mrs. Doubtfire reboot or follow up, that is what you do. I would love to see all that raw footage. I mean, come on, it'd be a great way to honor the late great Robin Williams. So Chris Columbus, 20th Century Fox, if you can put out such a documentary, I know I would not be the only one to go watch it, but many of Mrs. Doubtfire fans would love to catch a documentary about that. Robin Williams also was not only known for his improvisation, but he was known for trying to make everyone break character. Williams spent much of the day trying to make the cast laugh. Ironically, Sally Field said she almost never laughed during takes. She stayed focused on the emotional reality of her character. And Williams reportedly saw it as a personal challenge to get her to crack. Wow, that's another fun fact that I never knew. Becoming Mrs. Doubtfire took over 4 hours, as we said earlier. And let's talk about the 4 hours and what it took for Robin Williams to become Mrs. Doubtfire. Prosthetic facial pieces, a wig, dentures, a full bodysuit, makeup, and Costume fitting. The transformation took about 4.5 hours, as we said, and removing every thing took another hour or more, almost 5 hours just to take makeup off. Can you believe that? Robin Williams stood up for a young co-star. Lisa Jacob, who played Lydia, missed several months of school while filming the movie Mrs. Doubtfire, and it said that her school expelled her. Williams personally wrote a heartfelt letter asking the school to reconsider. The school refused, but reportedly framed this letter because it meant so much to them. So, poor girl who plays oldest daughter Lydia, she gets expelled because she missed so much school, and Robin Williams tries to go up to bat for her, you know, in real life, but the school said no, we're kicking her out. But like a lot of they get a letter from a famous comedian, famous actor like Robin Williams. The principal or whoever got the letter, but they saved the letter all these years. I guess they still held on to it at the school because they knew it would be worth something one day. I mean, that's kind of how people are. Let's be honest. Robin Williams secretly tested the disguise. One story says that he has circulated for years. Says Williams, fully dressed as Mrs. Doubtfire, visited a local adult bookstore to see if anyone recognized him. Apparently, nobody did. Okay, so the Mrs. Doubtfire was on. The disguise worked. I mean, what a great way to kind of test that, Well, well, often repeated by biographers, a little bit of trivia here was that it it isn't independently confirmed, but production records show that it's best viewed as a well-known Hollywood story rather than a verified fact. I kind of knowing what I know about what kind of actor Robin Williams was, I kind of believe the story that he actually went out and to an adult bookstore and kind of seen if he got any reactions or if anybody, thought, hey, there's Robin Williams dressed up as a woman, but apparently nobody did. You know what, I'm going to go with that story. Maybe it's not a verified fact, but again, knowing what I know about being a Robin Williams fan and what kind of actor he was, I'm almost willing to bet that story is like dead on. It's now the ending reportedly almost changed completely. At one point, studio executives wanted Daniel and Miranda to reconcile. Again, that would kind of tied everything up. Very nice, happy ending, as we like to see most movies end. But I kind of like the way they did it instead because I don't think it would have been very believable after everything that went on throughout the movie. And for most of the movie, she's talking about how she can't stand her crazy soon-to-be ex-husband, and she's a serious one, and he's the one the kids love, and just is so much fun. I don't know that it would have been believable for them to get back together. So I'm kind of glad that, because again, I think they could have had a Mrs. Doubtfire too at one point when Robin Williams was still alive, where maybe in part two, like I said, you'd see more about the TV show, The Adventures of Mrs. Doubtfire, and what it took to put on a show like that. That would be very funny to see, but I don't think it's going to happen, now. Robin Williams, in his effort to promote the movie, he even got dressed in character as Mrs. Doubtfire, effortlessly switching between the nanny's sweet voice and his own. His commitment to the role extended well beyond filming. One of the most remarkable aspects of a production is how much material still exists. Director Chris Columbus has said that there are hundreds of boxes of outtakes, alternative takes, behind-the-scenes footage given Williams' improvisational style. Many fans hope the archived material will eventually be edited into a documentary or some kind of special tribute to Robin Williams. And I really think that's what needs to happen. Now, before we wrap up tonight's episode, I thought we'd talk a little bit about what some of the critics had to say. One of the my favorite all-time critics of all time, and I think we're going to have to do an episode eventually on these guys. I'm talking about Siskel and Ebert, but in tonight's episode, I'm going to tell you what Roger Ebert had to say about the movie. Roger Ebert gave the film 3 out of 4 stars. He admired Williams' performance and appreciated that the movie didn't simply become another cross-dressing farce. Ebert also praised the ending for resisting the cliche of reuniting the divorced couple, writing that it respected the realities many children faced after divorce. And what I loved about this is, my parents been married over 50 years. They're still happily married. I'm not one of those children that ever experienced divorce, thank God. But many children did it, and having a movie like Mrs. Doubtfire, although they did it in a comedic way, for many children that at that time were experiencing divorce. Or I even think kids watching Mrs. Doubtfire that are living through their parents going through a divorce or have already gone through a divorce. Maybe it's a movie that helps them deal with that. And so I totally agree with what Roger Ebert said. And again, I think in a future episode, we're going to have to do an episode on Siskel and Ebert. They're two of the greatest movie critics of all time. They've since passed on, and we'll talk about that in another episode. I really had fun looking back on his classic film from 1993. Of course, the great Mrs. Doubtfire, starring the late, great Robin Williams and Sally Field and Pierce Bronson. What a great cast right there, starring cast. And I just, it's one of those movies that you can't help, laughing all the way through the movie. And finally, we're going to end on this, that one of the funniest scenes in the movie is where Robin Williams is in character as Mrs. Doubtfire, and he's in the bathroom peeing, and his son, Chris, and his daughter, Liddy, they walk in, and actually, Chris walks in and sees what he realizes is not Mrs. Doubtfire, but and then he has to reveal it. No, I'm not Mrs. Doubtfire. I'm your dad, and he explains that I'm dressed like this so that I can spend time with you kids. That was another kind of where the kind of big reveal happens for the first time in the movie, and so I had real fun looking back on this. Next week when we do episode 38, it'll be another fun comedic, my all-time favorite comedy movies, and of course I'm talking about Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That's another great classic comedy we're going to talk about. I'll see you guys again next week. Bye for now.